morning, everybody. It's really good to be here. I'm sorry I couldn't be here for the first few of you that were showcasing what you had to offer. My life, I kind of battle to get between one event and the next, and we need some real innovation to do with our traffic. There's a good challenge to put out there. But thank you very much. It's great to be here, Erica, to you and your team at the Design Innovation Seed Fund. The way that the CCDI is growing and evolving is amazing to see. I shouldn't say this on a platform, but less money makes you very innovative. But it really is great to see, and well done. I wasn't here in the beginning, so I'm not sure how much you said to the recipients of you're going to get some money to burn, if I remember last time, which is not something that you usually hear in a lot of the funding spaces in our region. So first of all, to Eric and your team, thank you. It's great to be here. I saw Mike Evans. It's nice to be here in this building. Thank you very much, and for the role that you play. And maybe I'll talk a little bit about that as we move on around the enabling environment, and specifically the legal space that we find ourselves in, and maybe some work that's happening there. I want to say to Vusis Kosana, there you are. Thank you very much for being a key partner in this space. I think without you guys, this wouldn't be happening, and we really, really do appreciate it. Our job is to create, I'm talking about our job as government in the region, is to create an ecosystem or an enabling environment. And the Western Cape government, our mantra is better together, which talks to partnerships, and partnerships are key. If we don't have good partnerships, we can't create the ecosystem that is going to be able to develop the future economy. And in this space that we're sitting at today, it's about the future economy. In my job, Minister of Economic Opportunities, because I have a Department of Economic Development and Tourism, and I've got a Department of Agriculture. But my job is the economy, and how do we enable it? And as government, we've got a small little role to play. There's so many role players in the economy, and we've got to make sure that we get that partnership to work, that ecosystem to work. And we've only got, as you said, so much budget, and in actual fact, as government, our budgets are shrinking. And without getting into politics today, that's the reality that we find ourselves in, and we've got to become smarter and smarter as to how we spend our taxpayer rands in our country and in our region to enable that ecosystem as best as we can. So thank you very much, a very, very key part of this specific partnership. So the ecosystem and what I spoke about, and I think if I take, I've been in this job now for too long, I think, for 8.5 years, and I think about the pathway that we've been walking for a while in the development of the ecosystem, and it must take me back to this city and this region winning World Design Capital, and I think that's where specifically, Erica, you and your team started to help us change the way that we think, change the way that we do things. But I want to say that I think that in a way we've almost lost a little bit of the narrative as a region as the whole, because we have these pockets of excellence that are really doing amazing things. And I think we need to have a proper discussion again as how we cluster the partners in the region again. To say, remember, we set ourselves a goal that design and innovation must be in our DNA. It's in what we do day in and day out. It's how we go to business. And I think we are losing it a bit there, and I think we need to have that conversation. I was in Hermanus, and this is a very kind of, probably not a story I should even be telling at a platform like this, but I was in Hermanus the other day, and I was at a guest house. The guest house is number 1 Marine Drive. And it is on a corner, a sort of curve in the road. And they've got a major problem because they keep on having accidents on this corner. There's a curve in the road, the coast is in front of you, and there's a side road that comes in the middle of this curve. And I stood on the balcony, and the week before, a car lost it on the corner and took out the whole front wall. Luckily, no guests were hurt or anything. But I stood on the balcony, and I just had a look, and no one can solve the problem. But just standing there looking, they've got a dotted white line around the corner, a blind corner. So automatically that says to people, you can overtake. It's got no speed camera there. It's got no speed warning there, and you've got this convergence of all these roads, and you wonder why there's accidents. And I just thought about it, and I thought, we just should have design thinking. I mean, first of all, just put a solid white line, say no right turn from people coming from the left-hand side. Just one or two very easy to implement design changes, and you suddenly make it a very different space. And of course, then you can even become a little bit more technical, and you can start just painting white lines in the road. I can't remember who put that up there once. I saw it in design. If you have a problem, it was in America I saw this. You had a problem in a corner where there were always traffic accidents because everyone went too fast and the corner was too sharp, and all they did was they painted white lines from about 100 meters before the corner, and they started painting them closer and closer together, just a thin white strip, and it gave you the effect as you drove over these lines that you were going faster, so you automatically slowed down and they stopped the accidents. So we need to make sure that design becomes much more of our DNA. But of course, what we're standing here today is not about basic, simple design like that. I mean, what we're sitting here with today is real, world-class innovation, world-class design and innovation that really can change so many things in our own ecosystem, but of course can become those, the entrepreneurs here, can become those change agents for so many things across the planet. So that comes back to the ecosystem and how we're designing it, and are we telling our story often enough? And that's the second message, is that we need to be telling these stories. And I unfortunately didn't get to see the presentations of everybody, but those that I did see, I read the script on each one of them. And that's one thing, you read it. But when you stand here and you hear the passion and you see the picture, and it's a whole different message that you leave with. And so how do we, and we need to talk about that as well, how do we get these stories out? And especially in South Africa where we are now. We're in a space where internationally we've got some rating agencies that are adding to a negative brand. And at the same time, our entrepreneurs are doing amazing things, but that gets discounted immediately because there's this brand. And we've got to tell that story to break through that negativity. Not only for that international world to see who we are, but for us, for our fellow South Africans. Because our fellow South Africans need to see what we've just seen this morning, what you've seen more than what I have. Our fellow South Africans need to see that, because you feel so proud when you stand here and you see what our entrepreneurs are coming up with. And so we need to really talk about that. How do we get the story to go out to every single corner of our country and, of course, the world? And then, of course, the third arena. And maybe before I get to the third arena, I think let's just speak about this space. And obviously, it is a very small space in the bigger picture of our ecosystem and our economy, because it's high risk. And of course, it means that you've got to have commitment with taxpayer rands that you're basically going to say, well, high risk, we're going to write this off really. And there's not a lot of that kind of funding. But if we tell the story more often, I think that what we will do is start to shift that ecosystem. If I think about this environment in which we sit, where we've got accelerators and incubators, we've got so many of them now, but that's sort of almost at the next level. This is where we actually need to start telling the story more often, so that we get those, not only government funders, but those private sector funders coming into the room. I was at the opening of the Startup Bootcamp office here in Cape Town the other day. Now, I first came across Startup Bootcamp in Amsterdam. So I met with them the other day. They've just opened, and that's a key partnership of an accelerator that uses big corporate money and really crazy entrepreneurs and those crazy ideas that people ordinarily would say there's no ways we're going to fund this. But they know that they've got to create that space. And it was very interesting. I spent an hour with them, And these are internationals and South Africans coming together. Innovation as we speak. These are internationals and South Africans coming together, but they bring a global network of corporate funding actually into Cape Town. And after an hour with them, I said to them, it's quite interesting. This was the day after Standard & Poor had given us a downgrade. And I said to them, here you guys are, internationals coming into this region, and not one of you have said anything about the downgrade. And they looked at me and they said, we don't need to worry about that. And they said, if you mess around with your currency too much, we'll just move over to Bitcoin. But that's a very clear message to say that the environment in which we are moving to, the ecosystem that is developing here, but also in other parts of the world, is changing so fast. And our job, as I started with saying, is developing that ecosystem, is helping that ecosystem, is bringing those partnerships together in the ecosystem. And the more and more I read about the fourth industrial revolution, about the changes that are happening in the world, the more often I meet with South African entrepreneurs and global entrepreneurs who are those change agents. The smaller the world gets, the more I'm convinced that this southern tip of Africa is going to be playing a more and more prominent role in that future economy. And I'm so petrified of that future economy that 20% of the world is going to control, own, and manage the 80%. And the 80% of the world is going to be on the dole, receiving a grant, on the end of a free government-paid-for Wi-Fi network and a just about free mobile device, so that those smart companies in 1 or 2 or the 20% of the world can take your grant money before it's even been put into your bank. Because as we know today, Amazon's sending you products before you even order it because it's based on your big data. And we can't allow that to happen. And I think that we've got an ecosystem developing here that is not going to allow that to happen. We are going to make sure that we are going to be playing a more and more prominent role. And if I had a session with my top management team in agriculture yesterday saying, we were talking about sort of the decisions that we're making for next year. And I said, while we're making decisions for next year, we must think about what is that economy going to look like in 50 years' time? What is an agricultural training institute going to look like in 50 years' time? Why are we worried about, let's at least think about what that's going to look like so it'll tell us what to do today. And who and what are going to be the relevant economic drivers and job creators? What are they going to be in our region here in the southern tip of Africa? And I'm pretty convinced that it's going to be innovation, tech, and agriculture. And that's probably going to be it. So, we've got the right ecosystem. I believe that we are going to be able to develop that innovation and tech for Africa in the agricultural space, because Africa is going to feed the planet. Africa is going to be the food basket for the planet. It's got the water, it's got the agricultural land, it's got the capability. We've just got to make sure that we get the policy space right and we get the innovation to make it happen right, and that we own it. We mustn't sell it to Silicon Valley or somebody else. We must own it, and we must develop it. And that ecosystem is developing right now, because I'm standing here listening or hearing some of your innovations, and I'm standing here because some people have come together to enable this environment. And so I think our job moving forward is how do we get the existing system, which is developing very fast, the accelerators and those, whether they be fintech or whether they be the enabling environment that the corporates are sitting, as I spoke about, startup bootcamp, etc. That side is happening, and the funding side. Vusi spoke about the funding and that funding mechanism, which is not easy to get right. But I think it is starting to develop here, and it actually is developing faster than we think. Because if you have a look at those success stories in our region, if you have a look at Yoka, Katlego Mapai, his second round, that funding came out of Silicon Valley and out of Amsterdam. We look at, Labashi. We look at Ikubu. That's international money coming in. and they're recognizing the innovation in this space. So coming back to my earlier point about telling the story, because the story helps us develop the ecosystem. We need to have much more discussion on talking about that story. Then perhaps, and I think there's only two more things that I need to say today, and that is the market or markets. And we also need to make sure, my team that's here, our job in economic development, we must make sure that we are pulling this through so that when the trade mission, we've got a trade mission going in 2 weeks' time to the UK, primarily initially was going to talk about our agricultural exports, and we don't want to lose any of the £9.5 billion exporting to the UK market post the Brexit discussion. We don't want to lose there. We want to actually gain out of this discussion. In Brussels, we want to be doing exactly the same thing. That trade mission is now split into two, because now it's not only telling or having an interaction on the risks around the Brexit process, but now it's getting to tell our story in a post junk status economy. And we've got a great story to tell. Just what we've had now today, we can tell that on platforms in markets. It's a great story. We've got to keep that light burning bright. We've got to keep that brand alive. So we've got to make sure that we linkage through what's happening here to the markets as well. And initially it's just the story, but secondly, it's how either a Wesgrow or a Knife Capital or whomever they are able to take your product globally, are able to attract those international investors so that it takes you to the next level. And perhaps that comes to the last point. And it was a very exciting meeting that I was involved in about 10 days ago, where the Reserve Bank asked us as a provincial government, the first time they've ever done it, they said, we want to meet with you, and our Minister of Finance, Ivan Meyer, and myself, and our teams, our economists, whether they be from economic development, from finance, or from agriculture, we met with the Reserve Bank. And they wanted us to tell them about what was happening in the ecosystem and the economy in this region. And I thought that was very exciting. And when they did their presentation, the presentation opened up with a discussion that has been happening over time, led by Silicon Cape, and the kind of work that happens here from Weber Wenzel on how do we change IP and the rules around IP and the enabling environment so that our entrepreneurs can play a far more meaningful role. And it wasn't, that was what we spoke about when we prepared ourselves for the Reserve Bank meeting, but they opened up with that to say, we know where these issues are. We thank you for those kind of engagements that have been happening with us up until now, and we are really working on trying to change this ecosystem. But that also reminds me about the Ikubu investment, when Keet van Zyl packed it up to the buyer's garment and said to them, so where do you want the IP? And they said, we want the IP in Stellenbosch. And he said, why? They said, no, we like it there because the innovation that's coming out of the region is great. We're actually going to pack up a whole lot of our stuff that we've been buying over time and ship it over to you, because you guys must work on this and take it forward into different marketable products. So we're developing an amazing system here. We must tell those stories more often. And then, I'm sure I've spoken more than enough, but I want to just put one challenge out to you, because you're all amazing entrepreneurs and you're coming up with exciting solutions. I think that we need to be teasing out your imagination on water solutions. It is a big issue for us right at the moment. And we had a crisis in energy not so long ago in our country and in our region. And as we stand here today, there are more than 2,000 independent power producers just in the city of Cape Town alone, and 18 municipalities in the Western Cape have got the rights to buy energy from independent power producers in their grid system. The energy space is changing fundamentally and dynamically. And I believe that we must use this water crisis as a space to tease out entrepreneurs to say, come up with some amazing solutions. So perhaps the next round that we fund, hopefully there'll become one or two really interesting ideas around water solutions that are not just for us because we've got a crisis, but for the planet. Because the planet's got this problem, not only us. And if Africa's going to play that role in the future, both being the food basket, but at the same time being that innovation capital being that design and innovation hub based right here in the southern tip that's going to change Africa and the way that we produce food for Africa. We've got to make sure that together that story is being told, that together we are building, that we are finding out where the pressure points are, but that we lead in so many more of those possible spaces that we could be finding solutions for. And we continue to do that. I would hesitate to say that we will also lose far less of our great entrepreneurs to other parts of the world. In actual fact, exactly the reverse is going to be happening. People from other parts of the world are going to be coming here to join us and our entrepreneurs because we are so amazing at innovation and design and changing and creating great solutions for the future. Thank you very much.